I guess welcome back to another episode, we'll start calling them, of Shop Teacher D. So, here's the plan. Yes, this has been sitting since November? September? No, October or November, because we did the neighborhood Christmas photos in a vintage truck, which is awesome. But you saw the last video, I got a whole lot of parts ordered, and what we're going to start doing is tearing into this intake manifold. So, it's going to be a mess. Then we are also hopefully going to get this radiator out. So pull the shroud, get it prepped. And I'm going to make a second video for that, but the big thing is going to be getting it out of the way to make my life easier getting to that intake manifold. So I might do two parts on that radiator, or we're going to film that, we're going to pull that, and you'll notice it's missing for the intake manifold removal video. One thing I am going to do first, though, is pull the battery. Just because when you get into the electronics and pulling anything, I always do that as a safety, and since I am a real shop teacher, I got to practice what I preach in making safety a habit. So I always do that as a precautionary measure. Pull what I can and make it pretty. Uh-oh, hear my phone buzz. Going on a healthy 4 hours of sleep because our 21-day-old decided to get gas and stay up all last night. So it was a pretty rough night. Uh-oh. And the text message definitely is not for my wife. So that's a good one. So we're going to pull this battery. We're going to pull the air cleaner. We're going to pull the carburetor. At some point, this will all disappear, and that's okay. Also, because I don't want to bump the fins on the new radiator. The 57's current radiator is the original. So she's a little beat up and dented. You can see I did a little soldering here last summer, and it made it through the entire summer. A little 99-cent Menards torch and some heat helped that. So she's a tired old gal. We're also finally going to get the billet overflow tank hooked up. I've been starting to get some positive comments, and I really appreciate it, guys. That's what keeps me going. The other thing we're going to do too is when I pull this distributor, I'm going to make a separate video just for my students because we're currently for the advanced class in the ignition unit. So not going to do the HEI yet, but we're going to swap that over in units to come. But I do have a new thermostat for it. I do have a new, let's see if I can actually get to that. To try and match the intake, I decided, I was looking at polished aluminum necks, filler necks, or goosenecks for the coolant. But I found this guy. This is a Dorman replacement. Let's see if we can get that part number for you. And this guy ran like $7 shipped to my door through the cartel known as Amazon. So that with the CarQuest thermostat, $6.99 or $7 or $4 or something, and this, that's a little bit of cheap insurance. I decided to go with the 180 thermostat too because I also found that the truck has never overheated. Kind of want to keep it that way. Some people might suggest doing a 165, but I'm hoping with the new intake manifold, we'll run a new temp gauge or get the old gauge cluster going, which you'll love that. That guy is way over back there in pieces. So that is going to be one of the next steps, or a future video, swapping that gauge cluster to another original one that I went through and cleaned up. And then we also got new Delco spark plugs. These are R45S's. Why did I go with those? Because this is a 307 motor out of a 68 Impala. So yeah, depending on the year, I could find that out. It was either 200 horse or all the way down to like 110. But keep in mind with a 2-barrel intake manifold. Hopping on forums, people love or hate these motors. I just cruise it daily. I'm not looking to go wicked and wild with horsepower and loss of fuel economy, because this is the Menards truck, the Home Depot getter, the IKEA parts picker-upper, and whatever we need it to do. So we're going to start going through spark plugs, gooseneck, and the radiator in the cab, in addition to the new intake manifold. So I don't know, maybe cue the time lapse now, but I'm going to do the best I can to not knock down the camera as I do this, and we'll go from there. Let's begin. All right, so pulling the battery is pretty much as straightforward as it gets. In theory, always remember to disconnect the positive terminal first. And I just actually got through teaching the batteries unit to my students this past week. So the reason you do that, and obviously I'm not following the rules in this one because everything was kind of hand tight, is so if you are loosening from the ground, remember that ground is connected to the frame. So if you're using that wrench with the oh, I'm an idiot. You do remove the negative first. I'm not going to re-record this, so sorry about that. That way, if you hit any of the grounds, you don't end up shorting anything out and having a nice explosion. So, when I first got this car, it did not have a battery hold down. So I actually reached out to the truck and car shop in Orange, California, to buy the top ring that held that battery down. And I was super grateful too that my neighbor, when he sold me the truck, he got the truck out of a gentleman in a local town whose father brought it from Gray's Lake. So, um, yeah, I got the appropriate hold down and had that is the original battery tray. I had sandblasted and then repainted with a pretty hard paint. So the great part about removing that battery too was it became a pretty quick parts tray, which was phenomenal. But as you can see now, what I am doing is going through and just removing vacuum lines, PCV lines, and things of that nature, breathers, just to kind of clear up the mess that is under the hood. Because doing the intake everything's got to come off when you're doing that intake manifold. So, plus the previous owners' spark plug wires of choice were like 4.5 feet long. I don't know if it was a universal kit and they just didn't make it fit or what, but those wires were wearing on me from the beginning. Um, from the beginning of ownership with this. So pulled off all the wires. The plan was, again, if you remember, plugs, wires. The whole purpose of all this was new intake manifold, the Edelbrock Performer, and a lot of what stemmed this was the oil leak coming from the passenger side, kind of under that automatic choke. I was getting oil pooling in the upper valley of that intake manifold on the top. So bugs were dying in there, get warm and smell oily. Not my cup of tea. So pulled the distributor cap, unplugged all those wires. Not sure where I am at this point, but probably getting tools. There we go. I had to snip some zip ties that were holding it all to the ballast resistor and that ignition coil. So after that, vacuum line for the distributor was out. I believe I also pulled the transmission vacuum line as well. Fuel line, that one was a little messier than I had hoped, and smoking a cigar while doing this, sometimes you have to think where to place it and think a couple minutes ahead. So, no fires, it was all good. This fuel line was later replaced with like a high pressure fuel injection braided line, which is phenomenal. And once all these videos have been posted, what I'm going to do is, um, what's it called? Give you a walk around of how everything went back together and how well it ended up going. So, um, fuel line was off, and all of the disassembly was pretty quick. It's the reassembly, and I forgot since I've been working on fairly stock cars and buying stock replacement parts. Um, Sometimes how tricky it is with some of the aftermarket and doing some fab work. So that I will kind of go through, and you'll see the struggle when I show you the reassembly video. But again, I've been taking 2 months off of YouTube because um, I had a second daughter born. She's fantastic. She's 4 months old now. I filmed this video in the early get go on a night where I had like adrenaline. I did the DeWalt Impact to zip off the stud nuts for the carburetor just because I wasn't feeling like leaning over and ratcheting and having like pained ribs the next day. So whatever was quicker with all the leaning over, because I did at this point still have the truck elevated from doing the shocks. So the nuts came off, the washers came off, and then let's see if I could get this. There was one that was tricky, but here I am pulling the kickdown cable for the Turbo 350 trans. I may do a video on how to do a kickdown adjustment for the transmission on that, but some people are for it or some are against it. Honestly, I've been running it without it now, and the truck still runs great. So
Maybe I'll start disturbing the peace again, get that kick down hooked up to counteract my neighbor's constantly barking dog. So let's give him a reason to bark. Throttle cable is removed at that point. Hand undoing the nuts. Gloves were super key too because everything kind of had a sheen of oil on it. And yeah, continued disassembly. Back ones were slightly difficult to get to again, mainly because the truck itself was elevated. That's all right. And then after that, it was just a matter of knocking the carburetor loose and um, getting it off of that intake manifold. So just like that, carb was off. Spacer was nice. The Edelbrock is a 6 or 650 CFM. Came on the truck. Believe the previous owner did purchase it, and it worked great. New gaskets went on when I put the new intake manifold together, and we'll get there. Everything was fairly clean at this point, and I did get a better view of all that oil that is right above that oil fill cap. You could see, no, it wasn't the oil fill cap leaking. Pulling the transmission kickdown cable. Now I am unhooking the automatic transmission vacuum line for shift and load and all that fun stuff. And that is to non-ported vacuum on the intake manifold. Um, and the struggle was real with this one. Um, then after that, it was a lot of coolant draining, which doubled. I do have videos. I have to just sort through gigs of media to be able to upload and do this for y'all because I pre-drained the fluid, the antifreeze from the system. So heater lines had to come off. Those were a pain in the keister. Radiator was drained at this point because the last thing I wanted was like coolant running down into the oil in the valley and the pan. And then, so one of these days I will be doing a pan gasket as well. So there we go. Vacuum plug was covering that fuel line. It was vibrating and would spray gas, which was, if I bung it, it flung it. So after this, upper radiator hose, and
upper radiator
housing,
hose
intake
removal
manifold,
was fairly simple. I know there's a splice in the audio on that one, but I'm back. My recording software only has certain amounts of time, so I zipped off the filler, not the filler neck, the upper radiator hose or thermostat housing. Interesting with the new one was the offset of the bolts, which I ended up not the offset of the bolts. The housing itself had two different size bolts where the old one did not. So I ended up having to watch that when reassembling, and you'll see again in a later video, so that I didn't strip any of the threads. So pull the thermostat. Was a bit irked to see that it was the same temperature rating. That's what I'm pointing to as the one I purchased. So without knowing if this one was good or not, the truck never behaved as if it was overheating, but I did just buy a rally cluster of gauges to put in, and also so I could start monitoring my engine temp. Here I am loosening up the old school, using the old school wrench, loosening up the distributor hold down bolt with the fancy wrench from my pops, and then pulling the distributor. We are one step closer to the intake manifold removal. Again, one of the issues I did have on this was the heater hose, and just the overall mess that doing a job like this creates with draining antifreeze. And the funny story behind draining the radiator was just essentially having the bolt fly out and having nothing to catch it in because I just thought I was pre-loosening it for later, and having 2.5 gallons of coolant on my floor in the garage. So distributor was out, restarting this. Now I realize the alternator bracket went to the front face of the intake manifold, and you will find the same mounting hole on the new Edelbrock Performers as well. So basic small block Chevy stuff there for you. And then get that bolt out. A lot of these bolts then I had sandblast, or I created my own tumbler where I had a glass jar with a metal ball jar lid, filled it with Black Magic sandblasting sand, and put the bolts in it, put in a drill with a little chuck, and rotated that drill
or left that drill on for a while, clean up those intake manifold bolts. And then I realized they look kind of cruddy, so we just had a new bolt set for to match the beauty of the new intake manifold. So you can watch the struggle. Sorry, I'm talking through it. We're at 2x video speed right now, so you can imagine my struggle here. Getting to this point, it was just a matter of mess, and more mess. Went through lots of gloves. That's okay. You'll notice I left the plugs in. At this point, I'm a big fan of not introducing anything into environments, but just of filth and stuff like that. So no matter how old the engine or whatever, I still treat it as if it was brand new or my daily Honda to make sure I don't compromise. Like, yeah, just introducing contaminants into it. So pulling the intake manifold bolts was pretty easy, even with that's actually a DeWalt drill, not even an impact driver, just set to drill. Pulling the temperature gauge or temperature sending unit, which doesn't work, unfortunately, and it was brand new. I had to do that in order to get one of the intake manifold bolts out. So if this is a job you're going to be doing at home, that is something you might have to consider. If anyone needs an old small block Chevy intake manifold, yeah, let me know. I'm going to do a super cleaning video on it, and then it's probably going to go up on Craigslist or offer up something like that if someone needs one. It ran great. I don't even know what it's from. I'd have to run casting numbers for you. But if you're looking for a stock small block Chevy 4-barrel manifold, the studs for the car as well were removed. Those are ARP studs, which turns out made me very happy. So now I just have, I think, two more bolts at this point. They were all the same length, so I was lucky. I know some people pull them and they're different. They shouldn't be, to my knowledge. But I got all those out after everything was pre-loosened. Getting the manifold unseated from the block with the years of gaskety goodness and getting baked on there wasn't as horrible as I thought. But you could tell it was time. And I will show you at the end of the video where the failure was that caused the oil to leak up towards the head and stuff. So these bolts are all coming out at this point, and um, you will see. Then we get that intake manifold off. That forward breather neck was a godsend when it came to like leverage and removal. But the Edelbrock Performer doesn't have that, but I do have plenty of crankcase ventilation through the oil fill cap slash breather on the PCV valve. So I did try to pull it out. It didn't work. But again, I've done tons of these with people. I had never really done one of these by myself. So again, learning experiences. The one intake manifold bolt, I obviously could not get the impact driver or the battery drill in there because of the filler neck. So had to go manual mode on that one. And we're going to be coming to a close here pretty soon. So while this is all sped up, the last 2 to 3 minutes are me walking around and back to regular speed. I'm not Sonic. I do not work this fast normally. But I have good music on, and one of the worst things I've found, you'll notice it's all prepped, is putting a TV in the garage. I get half the amount of work done that I did before. So these nights I was able to rip through stuff knowing I had limited time um, with no beer, maybe a cigar, and then yeah, good music. Good music can get me fired up. I vacuumed everything on the intake again to not have any contaminants as best as I could introduced into the valley under this intake. So cracked that loose, lifted it straight up, tried not to drag it so you don't pull crud in. That gasket alone coming off there was a sign that that thing wasn't seated well or wasn't sticking well. So definitely something to think about. So you will see in a couple seconds here, yeah, where there was the failure. So that one was better, but you can see the oil on that one where it was leaking, and that was just bad news.
Okay, so this is better than I thought it would look and healthier than I thought it would look. Where I was leaking onto the intake manifold, which started up this whole thing. It's right there. Looks like the gasket wasn't seating right, and it was coming up. I tried to show you that with the gasket. Oh, and I got a cable hook. But with the issue, with that issue arising, I was then like, well, if I'm gonna pull the intake manifold, might as well put something pretty on it and dress up. But vacuuming worked. I'm liking, yeah. Well, we're gonna pull plugs and read plugs and see how they all turn up. But that wasn't a horrible job. I'm gonna play this in 2 times or twice the speed or something. Maybe try to get some neat background music for you. But a little bit of tools I ended up using the battery tray for. I'm usually way more organized than this, but I'm going to take some time and do that. The beauty of this now is I got new intake manifold bolts, new gaskets, new everything. So it's going to be a lot of cleanup, a lot of carb cleaner. My favorite spray on the planet besides maybe cooking oil. I don't know. Did kill what I thought to be a male black widow, which was interesting. Should have taken pictures of that, but that was a scary little spider up by the battery tray. So a lot of the old hardware, I think I might toss. Yeah, unless like original 68 Impala intake manifold bolts are worth anything. But again, keep in mind this, I don't believe, was an original intake for it. So nothing matched. The block was red, valve covers are orange. This might have been a Franken motor. I know the gentleman I bought it from is a stand-up guy, so he's said to have gone through it or put something on it or had the heads off to look, and it was done right. Tricky thing is, I hate leaks. Everything I've ever owned leaks, so I'm going to spend extra time on the back intake manifold gasket, the front one here, and then obviously a solid cleanup for the sides. Going to read up. I know you just do a little dab of silicone here and there. I might even go out and buy some fresh silicone. Right? So, as you all know, reassembly always takes longer than disassembly. With only the upper radiator hose being off of the radiator, I'm going to have to take some time, pull the shroud, pull the fan, pull the radiator. I'm going to see if there's an easy way. Because I know when my father and I did this fan shroud, actually my dad did it, I'm a lazy sack, but he's amazing at what he does and a huge helper. He built the shroud and assembled it around and in because these didn't have it, but I think that's what's been a major helper in the cooling. But no bent push rods, everything looks healthy. I couldn't be happier. And that is the disassembly. So I may make a second video out of this, make it a 2-part for the disassembly and reassembly, but then again, maybe not. We'll see how long it ends up being because I know a lot of you have your own projects to work on instead of watching me work on mine, even though bench racing can be quite a bit of fun. So not a horrible disaster. You'll notice the coolant was drained prior. I got a great story about that. A lot of bug removal, proof this bad boy is driven, bald face hornets, dead stink bugs, sad little bumblebee, grasshoppers, God knows what, but it was all here. So next step is going to be reassembly. Here we go.